There's a John Lennon song that says, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. All of us have some idea of what we wished life was like. We have an idea of what we wished our life was like and how it would go. I'm assuming by now you've discovered that it doesn't go that way. It doesn't always go that way. If we're honest, we'd probably say it doesn't usually go the way that we wished it was. So life is what it is, and what it is often not what we wished it was. When life is what we wished it wasn't, which it so often is, a lot of people get stuck. So life goes on, but they stay stuck. We don't go on. We get stuck by some past disappointment, betrayal, or loss. We've got to learn to move forward so that our past doesn't dictate our future. You can't move forward when you keep looking back. This is illustrated in your car. In your car, you have this itty bitty rear view mirror up in the front, right? For looking back. And then you've got this great big windshield for looking forward. Why? Because you're supposed to spend most of your time going forward and looking forward. Very little time looking back and going backwards. In Genesis chapter 48, Jacob has now been brought to Egypt by Joseph. We'll tell a little bit of that story later, but I won't now. And he's telling Joseph about the part of his life that Joseph missed when they were separated for at least 20 years. We're not sure exactly how many, but at least 20. And in verse 7, Jacob tells Joseph about his mother Rachel. It's in your outline. Genesis 48:7. When I came to Padan, Rachel died to my sorrow in the land of Canaan on the journey while there was still some distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. In other words, it's another name for the town of Bethlehem. So in your outline, first, let's look at learning from Jacob's experience. Number one, sometimes the worst things happen. Sometimes the worst things happen. In Ecclesiastes 8:14, we're told that bad things happen not just to bad people, but to good people. In Ecclesiastes 7:15, it tells us that sometimes the good people die young and bad people live long lives. In Ecclesiastes 9:11, it tells us that time and chance overtake us all. In other words, stuff happens, and it happens to everybody. So if you love God, stuff's going to happen. If you don't love God, stuff's going to happen. Things are going to be like you wish they weren't. We have a great example of this in the life of Job. Job 1:1 tells us that Job was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. So Job obviously is a really good guy. So wouldn't you expect that everything, if he's a really good guy, wouldn't everything go well for Job? Well, it didn't. In Job 1:13-19, in one tragic day, Job lost all of his children and his vast fortune. He was the richest man in his day. He was the Elon Musk of his time. In Job 2, chapter 2, verses 7-8, he loses his health and nearly dies. So no matter who you are, no matter how much you love Jesus, sometimes the worst things happen. Among other things, for Jacob, it was losing the love of his life, Joseph's mother, Rachel. Sometimes worse things happen. Number two, life is what it is, not what we wished it was. Life is what it is, not what we wished it was. Some people, some Christians think, some preachers teach them to think this way, that if we're Christians, or at least good ones, then somehow we're exempt from the pain of living in a cursed world. We'll never have problems, difficulties, struggle with depression, or all those kinds of things. Jesus never promised that we wouldn't have pain and loss in this life. In fact, he promised that we would. Look at John 16:33 there in your outline. He says, in the world, you're going to have tribulation. He never promised us a pain-free life here. He's promised us a pain-free life in heaven, but not here. Life can be hard. It can be hard for anybody, and at times it's hard for everybody. Knowing, loving, obeying, and following Jesus makes it easier. It does not make it easy. So life is what it is, not what we wished it was. It can at times be everything we wished it wasn't. How many of you have been through one of those seasons? Right now, life is everything I wished it wasn't. Tough times. Jacob had been lied to by his other sons who sold his favorite son, Joseph, into slavery. He was told that Joseph was dead. Jacob had grieved the loss of Joseph for more than 20 years. It wasn't until he saw the wagons that Joseph sent to get him in Genesis chapter 45, verse 27, that as the Bible puts it, his spirit revived, which means he had been in at least a 20-year depression. He got stuck. He never got over losing Joseph, but now his spirit revived. And then he lost Rachel. Life is what it is, not what we wished it was. Number 3. We must move forward when we'd rather give up or quit. We must move forward when we'd rather give up or quit. How many of you have felt like giving up or quitting at least once? I just quit. I've just given up. It's not worth it. I'm checking out. Notice that Genesis chapter 48, what Genesis 48:7 says. Jacob lost Rachel, watch this, on the journey while there was still some distance to go. Rachel's life was over. Jacob's life wasn't. Things can happen that end chapters in our lives, like the loss of a loved one. But there are more chapters to live. We can't give up or quit. God still has a plan for our life. And that plan is for us to keep going, to move forward. Look at these verses in your outline about moving forward. In Philippians 3:13, Paul says, one thing I do. Remember what was the move? There was a guy named Curly who said there's just one thing. I can't remember some Western movie. There's just one thing. So Paul says, one thing I do. What is it, Paul? Forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead. Now, watch this. Paul doesn't just happen to let go of the past. He doesn't just happen to do that. He deliberately lets go of it. He deliberately lets go. He forgets it. He chooses to forget it, move forward, put it behind him. Jesus said in Luke 9:62 that no one, after putting his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. So walking with the Lord is moving forward. When I quit moving forward, I've quit walking with the Lord. If I say that I can't move forward, it's just too hard, then what I'm really saying is that I do not trust the love, the goodness, and the strength of God. I do not trust it. Therefore, I can't move forward. When I don't move forward, it's not that God is insufficient. The problem is that I am deficient. I'm not trusting in the God of the Bible. I'm trusting in a weakened version of Him that I have in my head. I'm trusting in a God who is not able, and therefore I stay stuck, rather than a God who is able, and therefore I will not stay stuck. So we've got to move forward when we'd rather give up or quit. Jacob likely felt like quitting when he lost Joseph. He likely felt like it again when he lost Rachel. But there was still life to go. He was on a journey, and there was some distance to go. How many of you have buried somebody you love? All over this place. You buried them on the journey, on your journey. Their journey came to an end. Yours did not. There's still some distance to go. So we have to move forward, which begs the question, when must we move forward? What are the kind of circumstances that we have to move forward from? Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but I think what I've done is taken the two primary areas that are most difficult to move forward from. So here they are. Number one, we must move forward when people aren't who we wish they were. We must move forward when people aren't who they wished they were. Not only is life sometimes what we wished it wasn't, people are often who we wish they were not. Not only is life sometimes exactly what we hoped it would not be, sometimes we find out that people are exactly who we hoped they would not be. I've given you two examples of this in your outline. One example is, number one, when people have disappointed us. When people disappoint you, it makes you want to quit, makes you want to give up, especially if you had a bunch of them. You think, is it even worth it? Can you trust anybody? I just think I'll just shut down and protect myself. When people disappoint us, you're going to get disappointed by people, write this down somewhere, all of your life. All of your life, people are going to disappoint you. Some of them are going to mean to. Most of them won't. But they'll disappoint you. Look what it says in Ecclesiastes 7:20-22. It says, there's not a righteous man on earth who continually does good and who never sins. And then he gives us an example. Do not take seriously all words which are spoken, so that you will not hear your servant cursing you. For you also have realized that you likewise have many times cursed others. I put three things in your outline under that. Number one, all people are people. I told you this is a thinking man's church. You wouldn't have figured that out, have you? Would you? All people are people. Number two, all people disappoint people. All means all. You do, I do. The person who disappointed you does. Number three, we are people. I get disappointed and I disappoint. I sure don't want to disappoint people. I try not to disappoint people. But the truth is, sometimes I do. And sometimes you do. There are no perfect people. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. In every relationship, think about it. In every relationship except mine with my wife, because I'm a smart man, okay? But all the rest of them in the world, every person that you love, there's something about them that you consider to be less than optimal. I've tried to say that the nicest way I could, okay? There's something about them that's less than optimal. There's something you'd like to change, okay? Isn't that true? So you can focus on that part you'd like to change, and you can just get real disappointed with them. It may just be 1% of who they are, but you can obsess with it and you're in trouble. Or you can focus on all the good, the 99% or 80% or however much it is, and think, this is a great person that I'm married to. This is a great friend that I have. Perfect? No. But look at how good they are, all the good there are. We like and love people because of what we like and love about them. But there's nobody that we like and love everything about. And if you think you do, you just don't know them well enough yet, okay? There'll be something. If you throw people away for any imperfection, you're going to throw everybody away. And if you have to be perfect for people to love or like you, you're a goner. Now, those two sentences right there are worth about 6 months of therapy. If people have to be perfect, you're not going to have any friends. And if you got to be perfect, nobody's going to like you. But they said something about me. So you've never said anything bad about anybody. If that's you, stand up. And the next question will be, we'll all just point and say, liar, liar, pants on fire. And somebody will light you up. Don't you wish that was true when people lie, their pants just catch on fire? I'd pay to go watch certain preachers. But what they said hurt me. And you've never been hurt and mad and said something negative about somebody that you maybe later regretted, or maybe you didn't. Sure you have. Don't you find it interesting how harmless and forgivable it is when we do something, and how damaging and unforgivable it is when someone else does it? Aren't we hypocrites if we do that? I've recently posted this on Facebook. Forgiveness is medicine for the soul. Forgiveness is deciding that the way you want things to be will determine what you think and say and do moving forward. Otherwise, you allow what has already been thought, said, and done in the past to continue to dictate the relationship in the future. People who forgive are strong, not weak. They're wise, not naive. Spiritual, mature, big people initiate reconciliation. They let go of the past. They extend forgiveness. Now, we're great at doing this with our children, aren't we? I mean, they can offend us 100 times, and we give them the bat and say, go hit again. Give them another at bat. But boy, we can be lousy at doing this with other people. Big people care more about relationships than they care about being right. If you can only have relationships with those who have a perfect record with you, you won't have any relationships, not for long. A little bit of marriage advice. You need to care about the two of you being right more than you care about you being right. Because if you care about being right, the two of you won't be right for long. You got to care more about the relationship than you do your opinions. And some of us, won't we die on any hill? Because of where we've come from, how we've been broken as children, we would fight to the death for any opinion we have. We have to be right because we think if I'm not right, I'm not perfect, and I'm not perfect, I'm nobody. And nobody would ever like, want, or love me. It's not true. It's not true. And are we glad, back to my post, and are we glad that God doesn't hold us hostage to what we've thought, said, and done in the past? He allows what He wishes to be, what He wants us to become, to determine His behavior toward us moving forward. So if God wanted to judge us all for what we've done, said, and thought, we're all goners. But instead He says, I'll forgive you, and I'll relate to you on the basis of what I hope you're going to say, hope you're going to do, and hope you're going to think. Have you been disappointed by somebody? You got to let it go and move on. Isn't that what you hope they'll do if you disappoint them? And if you don't let it go and move forward, then you allow the past to determine the future. You allow what happened to determine the relationship rather than what you wish the relationship could be. And let me tell you another thing we do. When we get hurt by somebody and we don't want to try to fix it, we just act like we don't care they hurt us. I just don't care. I don't care if we ever get it right. You know what you're doing? You're on a river in Egypt. It's called denial. Okay? And you're living in denial. That's just the easier thing to do. It's easier to be mad than it is to be sad. That's why we're so often angry. Mad sounds so strong, and sad sounds so weak. Weeping feels so weak, and yelling and coming over the top of somebody feels so strong. They're both the same thing. The same thing. Angry people are sad people who don't know how to deal with their sadness. We've got to move forward when people disappoint us. Number two under that, we've got to move forward when people have betrayed us. Now, probably most of us in here have felt betrayed at one time. If you're in the ministry, you become an expert at this, okay? But we've been betrayed at some time. Look at Psalm 55, 12 to 13. The Psalms are great writings. David writes a lot of them. The other psalmists, they just write from their heart. They just tell it like it is, tell what they feel. They pray great prayers like, God, knock his teeth out. You ever prayed a prayer like that? It's biblical. Knock his teeth out. You go, that's how I feel. I said, right, that's why the Psalms are in there. So here's David saying, it's not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who's exalted himself against me, then I could hide myself from him. But it's you, a man my equal, my companion, and my familiar friend. Oh, that hurts. That hurts when somebody you counted on, when somebody thought you could trust. Sometimes we move forward in a relationship. Sometimes we have to move forward from a relationship. Everything that gets broken doesn't always get fixed. But we have to let go of the anger of being betrayed, or the betrayal attaches itself to our souls. You forgive that person, you don't let them off the hook, you let yourself off of their hook. Does that make sense? You're not letting them off the hook when you forgive them. You're getting your emotions off of their hook. Otherwise, you stay angry. Forgetting what lies behind is a choice that we make. It's not amnesia. It's not amnesia. Yeah, they hurt me. It hurt a lot. I chose to not let it continue to hurt me. I'm moving forward. And you do. And you do. If we don't forget what lies behind, we can't move forward. Not like we're supposed to. Look at Colossians 3:13. Bearing with one another, that means putting up with the things in others we wished weren't. Forgiving each other when we've been disappointed, when we've been betrayed. Whoever has complained against anyone, just as God forgave you, so also should you. How many of you have betrayed God? How many of you said you'd do something and did it? It wouldn't do something and did it. Some of you promised in actual prayers, God, I swear I'll never do it again. And you did it again. Aren't you glad God is so willing to forgive? When you become like Him, that's the kind of person you become. We must move forward when people aren't who we wish they were. And don't forget that all of us at times are people that we wish, that others wished we weren't. Every one of us. Now here's the second one. Not only do we move forward from people when they're not who we wish they were, number two, we must move forward when life isn't what we wished it was. We must move forward when life isn't what we wished it was. So there are people who are not who we wish they were, and then life is so often what we wished it wasn't. In fact, there's almost always something in our lives that is not the way we wished it was. How many of you right now can think of something in your life that is not the way you wished it was, okay? I need more appendages to raise. It's not the way I wished it was. When life is as we wished it was, which is a lot, or we have to move forward. So we move forward when life is good. We move forward when life is hard. So when is life what we wished it wasn't? Number one under that, when someone we love is taken from us. When someone we love is taken from us. This was the case when Jacob lost Joseph. This was the case in Genesis 48:7 when Jacob lost Rachel. It was the case when David lost his best friend Jonathan. It talks about it in 2 Samuel 11:25-26. We all eventually lose people we love. The older you get, the more of them you've lost. We can't get stuck or quit. We have to move forward. We lose those people on our journey while there's still some distance to go. So everybody in here is going to bury somebody we love. We got to keep going. Now think about this. If the person you lost really loved you, okay, then wouldn't they want you to move forward? If they really loved you, do you think they're up in heaven thinking, boy, I hope he gets stuck. I hope he quits. I hope he or she just stays depressed and just the rest of their life is miserable because I'm not in it. I'm telling you, anybody would think that doesn't love you. Anybody that loved you says, I hope they go on. I hope they laugh again, live again, maybe love again. I want the best for them. I want them to be happy. I want them to have joy. I want them to move forward. So we have to move forward when someone we love is taken from us. Some of you in here, many of you buried your parents. Some of you have buried siblings. Some of you have buried children. Has anybody buried a grandchild? I don't know if anybody's buried a grandchild here. A whole nother level. So we got to move forward when life is not what we wished it was. And sometimes that's when we lose somebody that we love. Number two under that, we've got to move forward when the life we wanted is taken from us. When the life we wanted is taken from us. Not some person, but the life we wanted. So sometimes it's not a person that we love that we lose. It's something we loved about our lives that we lose. Consider these three true statements about life I put there in your outline. First one is this: life was what it is, not what we wished it was. The truth sets you free. When you believe that, you'll be a lot happier person. Here's the second one. We don't get to live in the fantasy of what we wished was. We live in the reality of what is. We don't get to live in the fantasy of what we wished was. We live in the reality of what is. You can create fantasies about your life, but you don't get to live in them. Well, I wish this, and I wish that, and I wish that. You know, if you wish upon a star, no matter where you are, you're going to get it. No, you don't. Our reality is not as bad as it seems when we let go of the fantasy that we wished was. I'm going to say that again. Our reality is not as bad as it seems when we let go of the fantasy that we wished was. No life, no person can compete against a fantasy. Because see, a fantasy is not real. You can make somebody as nice as you want to make him, you know, whatever you want to make him to be, and then pretend it's all true. It's kind of like a long distance relationship. When you're not with somebody, you can think all day about all the things you love about them. Some of those people, if you live with them for 20 minutes, all you can think of what you didn't like about them, right? But as long as it's a fantasy, you can just make it anything you want it to be. Isn't that great that you can do that in your head? But you don't get to live there. You got to live in a reality. I've seen all kinds of people chasing fantasy give up a really good reality for a lesser reality and sometimes a bad reality. But they just knew that next person was going to do it for them, or that next thing was going to do it for them, that next job was going to be it. No, it wasn't. Even a good reality can't compete with a fantasy. If you've been around here, you've heard me say this a lot. That's the next one. Most of life is making the most of what we wished wasn't. Most of life is making the most of what we wished wasn't. There's just almost nothing that's exactly like you wished it was. And so you can give all your attention to how it's not what you wished it was, or you can give your attention to what is good about what it is. Our lives are full of good and bad. Things we like, things we dislike. They're probably never all good, even though sometimes we feel like they are. And they're probably never all bad, even though sometimes we might feel like they are. The truth is, what's wrong in our life gets far more attention than what's right. We all have to do a lot of making the best of what we wished wasn't. Now, here are two great biblical examples of individuals who made the best of what they wished wasn't. They are people who lost the lives they wanted. Now they're going to have to live in the very lives they didn't want. They didn't sign up for them. If they'd had any power to avoid them, they would have avoided them. But life grabbed them and threw them into a life they didn't want. Here's the first one. The first one is Daniel. Daniel lost the life he wanted. Daniel was a Jewish slave in Jerusalem. He was taken into captivity and made a slave. Well, he was free in Jerusalem, but he was taken into captivity, made a slave by the Babylonians. Rather than drowning in despair and giving up, Daniel made the best out of what he wished wasn't. He honored God. That's what you always ought to do. When your world falls apart, the first thing you ought to do is stop and write down on paper, this is who God wants me to be. This is who I will be at this season of my life. You go through a divorce, the first thing you do, here is how I will honor God as a single man or as a single woman. If you don't do that, you probably won't honor God as a single man or a single woman. I've just lost a child. Whatever the loss is, you decide this is who I'm going to be. I'm not going to let my feeling in any moment dictate who I'm going to be. I'm going to let what I believe God wants me to be and what I've determined to be determine who I'm going to be. So God honored what Daniel did. Over time, Daniel essentially became second in the kingdom to not one, but two Babylonian kings. We could say he became like the vice president. The better picture is probably England, where you have a queen or king, but the person who really runs everything is the prime minister. which they've had, 4 in the last few years. They're on a roll over there. But anyway, it's another story. So Daniel becomes the prime minister, essentially, of not one Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar, who took him into slavery, but a second Babylonian king. So when Nebuchadnezzar dies, the next king leaves him in the same spot. Look at Daniel 6:3. Daniel distinguished himself, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. Now, Babylon was eventually conquered by Persia. Daniel again is taken as a slave. Daniel again had determined in his heart who he would be, what he would do, what he would not do. He was going to move forward. He was going to make the best out of what he wished wasn't. And everything around him was what he wished wasn't. He did the best he could in the place where he never wanted to be. And you know what? God honored him. And the second kingdom of a non-Jewish nation, this Jewish slave, served well, rose again to the top, and became second in the kingdom to not one Persian king, but 2. Unbelievable. One of the greatest stories in history. A slave being taken into captivity, rising to become the prime minister under 2 Babylonian, non-Jewish emperors, kings. And then they get conquered by Persia. He's just a slave. And next thing you know, he rises to the same place. Look at Daniel 6:28. Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. What a story. How did it happen? He made the best out of what he wished wasn't. His life had become everything he never hoped it would be. But he didn't quit. He didn't get stuck. He decided he had to move forward. Now, as television infomercials say, but wait, there's more. The legendary Paul Harvey used to say, now for the rest of the story. Because of Daniel's influence in Persia, Jews were eventually able to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, which is what the book of Ezra is about. And they were able to go back another group was able to go back and rebuild the wall, which is what Nehemiah was about. And guess who paid for it all? The kings of Persia. They're building a Jewish temple. They're rebuilding the city that Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed. You say, why on earth are they doing this? It's because somebody was where he wished he wasn't. Somebody was in the very place he never wanted to be. But wherever God put him, he did the best he could with what he had. He moved forward. And so Daniel influences 4 kings, not Jews, for the Lord. He definitely was where he didn't want to be. Daniel 1:8 tells us a part of his secret. It says there, he made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine with which he drank, which they drank. Daniel continued to do the right thing even when the circumstances were not of his choosing. He made the best out of a life that he wished wasn't. He did that when he lost the life he wanted. Turned out pretty good, didn't it? I mean, what a story. How would Jerusalem ever get built if Daniel hadn't been a slave? If Daniel's story the story he wanted hadn't been flushed down the proverbial toilet, and now he's having to live under 4 kings, 4 lives he didn't want to live, but he honors God and keeps moving forward in all of them, and now history changes because of it. Great, great story. Now there's another great story in the scripture, and that's about Joseph. Joseph lost the life he wanted. I've already mentioned him. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave. When he gets to Egypt, he's resold to a man named Potiphar. Joseph chose to move forward. He sought to make the best out of what he wished wasn't. He did the best he could where he was, which was somewhere he didn't want to be. He chose to do the right thing in the midst of unfair and horrible circumstances that were completely out of his control. So what happened? Well, Potiphar eventually trusted Joseph to run his household and even pay his bills. Look at Genesis 39:2-3. The Lord was with Joseph. Hold it, stop. Joseph's a slave. What do you mean the Lord was with him? Joseph's not in Palestine with his family. He's in a nation of people. He didn't know their language. He's never seen them before. Never intended to go there. And the Lord was with him. Sure was. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. You didn't know you could succeed and be a slave, did you? Now his master saw that the Lord was with him and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So we're told the Lord was with Joseph. Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph. Now remember, this is a Lord Potiphar doesn't even believe in. He's an Egyptian. He doesn't believe in the God of the Bible. But he believes Joseph does, and he sees God's hand on him. So God's with him. Potiphar sees it. I'm pretty sure that Joseph was convinced that God was not with him. Not that he was. He felt abandoned. He felt betrayed. Here I am. I'm just minding my own business. I'm a young kid. Next thing you know, my brothers want to kill me. Then they sell me as a slave. And I get down here, and here I am, a slave in a country I never wanted to go to. You think Joseph's situation's bad, and then it gets worse. Potiphar's wife was attracted to Joseph and tried to seduce him. Joseph refused her advances, so she joined the ancient Me Too movement and falsely accused him of trying to rape her. Okay? Now, everybody in the Me Too movement didn't falsely accuse somebody, but you understand the point. She claimed he tried to rape her. He wouldn't try to rape her. In fact, when he had a special coat, and when she tried to rape him, basically, he fled. And she kept his coat, but she didn't get his character. Now think about it. If there was any man who deserved one night of pleasure, one night of forgetting about everything, including God, one night of getting rid of the numbness of all they had been through, if anybody ever deserved that, wasn't it Joe? But Joe was like Daniel. A long time ago, he decided the kind of person he was going to be, and his circumstance would never change that. And so he left his coat, but he didn't give up his character. And by the way, he didn't leave because I don't think he left just because he knew what Potiphar's wife was trying to do. I think he left because he knew what he wanted to do. If you hurt long enough, you get empty or hurt long enough and deeply enough, you will do something to get relief. You'll have an affair, you'll go to alcohol, you'll go to drugs, you may take your own life. You'll do something. If you hurt long enough and deeply enough and don't get something to fix it. Do something appropriate to fix it and deal with it. But Joseph said, no, it doesn't matter what I want to do. It's not the kind of man I want to be. And so out he goes. So she accused him of trying to rape her. So he gets thrown into prison. Look at Genesis 39:21. Tells us about his prison stay, which is several years more. 29:31 to 23. The Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. And the chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge, because why? The Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. So even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. I don't think Joseph felt like he was with him. I think Joseph felt like he just got betrayed and abandoned again. He's just disappointed again. How could this happen? I did the right thing. When you do the right thing, something good's supposed to happen for you. I did the right thing, and now I'm thrown in jail. But wherever he ended up being, and it was every time it was somewhere he wished he wasn't, he ended up being the kind of person God wanted him to be. He kept trying to move forward. Again, he felt betrayed, not just by Potiphar's wife, but now by Potiphar. Potiphar could have said, I don't believe his wife, and I don't think he did believe his wife, because if he did, he would just cut his head off. But instead, he threw him in jail. So here's Joseph, betrayed and abandoned by his brothers, betrayed and abandoned by Potiphar's wife, betrayed and abandoned by Potiphar. Now he's in a jail, betrayed and abandoned by God, surely. He could quit. Or he could try to move forward, which is what he did. So he continued to do the right thing even when he had been done so wrong. And the head jailer noticed it. And before long, he's running the jail. One of the inmates is in charge. Over time, 2 of Pharaoh's servants were thrown into prison. Both had dreams. Joseph interpreted those dreams and asked the cupbearer, who was going to survive, to tell Pharaoh about him and tell how he had been wrongly accused and imprisoned. So the cupbearer goes back, he gets his life back, and he forgets about Joseph. Disappointed, betrayed, abandoned again. Are you kidding me? He forgot about him. But then eventually Pharaoh had some dreams, and nobody could interpret them. And the cupbearer had a little mental moment and said, there's a guy in prison who interpreted my dream and the other guy's dreams, and they were true. So they bring Joseph out. He interprets the dreams. And look what happens next in Genesis 41 and 44. Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Which, by the way, in all these cases, with Daniel and with here in Egypt, these were the most powerful countries in the world. These were those small places. These were the world powers. Verse 44, though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission, no one will raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Wow. How did he get that job? By getting betrayed and feeling abandoned over and over again. By doing the right thing and getting punished for it over and over again. Like Daniel would be later, Joseph was given rule over Egypt under a non-Jewish king. As a result of his exaltation and new position, Joseph would save his family, the Jews, because they would have died in the worldwide drought had he not brought them to Egypt. And essentially, he helped to save you. Because had the Jews died, there would have been no Jesus. So when you get to Joseph, get to heaven, you need to find Joe and thank him. Perspective can really change how you see things. At this point in the story, we can clearly see that God was with Joseph. But the journey through the multiple betrayals and feeling abandoned that brought Joseph to this place of honor and eternal purpose, we could see it happening because we look back on it, but he didn't see it. He just saw another letdown, another time. God, where are you? I trust you. Is this how you treat your friends? No wonder you don't have me anymore. Joseph could have quit several times on God, on life, on himself, but he didn't. He moved forward. He made the best out of what he wished wasn't. And wow, what a story he left. As we look at the lives of Daniel and Joseph, we had the perspective of seeing the end of their stories, how things eventually turned out. They didn't have that luxury until they got to the end of the stories. They could only choose to be who God wanted them to be wherever they ended up being, which was in both cases never where they wanted to be. They could only choose to do right even though they were done wrong. If you remember the men in Babylon who were jealous of Daniel got the king to pass a law that ended up throwing Daniel in the lion's den. So God had to save him from that because they were trying to get him killed so he couldn't have that position. They could choose to do right when wrong. They could only make the best out of what they wished wasn't. And every time they did it having no idea how it'd turn out. Now that's a big point. If I could sit here and promise you, if you'll just keep doing the right thing, here's what you're going to get in the end. Well, I can tell you that for heaven, but not in this life. But maybe you'd do it if you say, okay, I know this is going to be a real hard season. And Joseph's, it was like around 20 years for him. Or actually, he was 13 from prison, from selling as a slave to seeing the Pharaoh. But 13 years. Okay, will you throw 13 years of your life as a slave if you could be the prime minister of Egypt? Now, if you had a deal like that, you may go, I think I'll take it. You might not. I don't think I would, but you might. I think I'll take a deal like that. But here's the deal. He didn't have a deal like that. You've got to do the right thing not knowing yet. In heaven we know, but not knowing yet what we're going to get for it. You don't do the right thing because of what you get for it. You do the right thing because of who you become by it. Who you become by it. And so they did the right thing, having no idea how it would turn out. They had no idea their lives were going to become what they became. We don't have control over how things turn out. Romans 12:18 tells us, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Now, the reason it says if possible, because it isn't always possible. You don't have control over what others will do. So you don't have control all the time over how things will turn out. You don't have control over what they will do, but you have complete control over what you will do. You don't have control over how things will turn out, but you have complete control over how you will turn out. And let me add this, God is far more interested in how you turn out than he is in how things turn out. People in life are going to kick you in the teeth or in the gut sometimes. Ecclesiastes tells us about the unfairness of life. Here's the big question. Listen closely. The big question is not, what are others going to do over which I have no control? The big question is, what am I going to do over which I have complete control? The big question is not, what is life going to be like over which I have little control? The big question is, what am I going to be like over which I have complete control? The big question is not, will life sometimes knock me down? Guarantee it will. The big question is, will I stay down or will I get up? The big question is not, will my life and relationship have setbacks? They all do. Every marriage in here, if you've been married long, both of you have wanted to walk at one time. Okay? Now don't come up and tell me that you're the exception, because then I won't believe anything else you say, okay? So don't try that on me. There's been some times you've been hurt, you've been disappointed, and it's entered your mind. Hopefully it didn't stay there long, but it entered your mind. You know what? I think I'm getting out of this. I don't think I'm going to put up with this. I deserve better than this, whatever it might be. Big question is not, will my life relationship have setbacks? Big question is, will I give up, quit, or move forward when they do? Romans 8:28-29 tells us God uses bad things that we go through for good. He uses them to make us like himself. Deuteronomy 23:5 tells us that the Lord our God turns our curses into blessings for us because he loves us. Genesis 50:20 tells us that even when people do what they do on purpose to hurt us, God will use it to help us. And that's Joseph speaking, by the way, to his brothers. He didn't cut them any slack. He didn't live in denial. He knew they did exactly what they meant to do. They meant to get rid of him, and they meant to hurt their dad. They were sticking it to their dad because he treated Joseph differently from them. He didn't give me slack on that. He said, what you did, you meant it for evil. But you know what? We have a God that even when somebody tries to hurt you and they mean it for evil, our God can turn it to good. Can somebody say hallelujah? Wow. If there's no other reason on the planet to serve God, there's a great one right there. What incredible promises. As we saw with Daniel and with Joseph, our God is always with us, even when life isn't what we wished it wasn't, what we wished it was. He's with us even when it seems like he isn't. God uses the things in our life that we wished weren't, not the things that are the way we wish we are, to accomplish his work in us, turning Daniel and Joseph in the kind of men they were, and his work through us, using them to affect God's kingdom worldwide. When life isn't what we wished it was, even when life seems to be everything we wished it wasn't, God is more than able to still bless us and use us if we're willing to trust him and keep moving forward. Now let's be honest, sometimes moving forward we can sprint. We can just take off. Sometimes moving forward, all we got in us is a jog. Sometimes all we got in us is a walk. A few times all I've had in me was a crawl. Maybe I can go down lower and have a drag in me. I just drug myself along. But I moved forward. Move forward. Our meaning and greatest joy should not come from any person or thing that we can lose. If I lose that person dies, I'm a goner. Our greatest joy and our purpose needs to be bigger than the people we live with. Imagine the pressure on a spouse if you're the primary person in their life and the person who's supposed to make them happy and give them meaning. I don't envy you because you're signed up for a job you can't pull off. So I'm to get my joy and meaning from the Lord. Bet you can't deliver that for me, and I'll get disappointed with her for doing what God never intended her to do, what she has no capability of doing. My heart longs for something more than her. This makes sense? So I've got to get my joy from then. If not, if the person I love dies, I'm through. I bury a child, I'm through. I lose my job, I'm through. I lose my money, I'm through. I lose my health, I'm through. But if I'm living, if I'm loving the Lord God with all my heart, mind, soul, body, and strength, if He's first in my life, if He's really my Lord, if He's what I live for and what I die for, all those things can knock me down, but not a one of those things can knock me out. When you live for lesser things, it doesn't take much to knock you out. How many of you seen somebody got knocked out? They just got stuck, and they've been stuck ever since. So you need to build your life around one you can never lose, Jesus. Listen to this, I'm through. The abundant life that Jesus came to give us here is not a life that is absent of problems. It's a life that is full of purpose and His presence. That's the abundant life.